Welcome to our Strategy Huddle on Innovation Strategies, Part 3, which was edited from a longer webinar.
Okay, so as we noted, we're going to talk about two types of innovation strategies. That's called the shallow side. And then we're going to move into a conversation of looking at some of the other ones that are a little bit deeper. So innovation strategies, they're the name of the game. That's what we're going to jump into business model innovation. So business model innovation is really about redesigning the value chain. So this is now moving from the shallow dive innovation strategies to something that's a little bit deeper. And bringing in everything that we can from all sorts of best practices and great consulting organizations out there, IBM being one of them, of course. They had this cool framework for business model innovation that Howard's going to speak to. But I just wanted to share that 2 times ago on the Huddle, we talked about a business model innovation case study for a church. And I think if this is something that you're thinking about, certainly there's a lot more to talk about related to just straight up, how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we reinvent our value chain when we're and how do we think about how we deliver value in the context of our whole organization? And the business model is certainly one way. Business model structure and process is one way to do that. So Howard, talk to us about the 3 types of business model innovations.
When I reviewed these, definitely they're not siloed. There's whenever an organization goes into some type of different revamping of their business model, there's going to be some crossover. But probably the easiest way to look at these would be the industry model would be innovation would be an external perspective, and the enterprise model on the right side would be an internal perspective. And where I would put those, I would call that almost like a disintermediation. Let's pull the whole value chain apart and figure out if there's some part of it that's not bringing value, let's dis it. Let's get rid of it, intermediate, bring another mediation, add some together. There's all kinds of examples we could go into that have done that, where online, where you've got organizations like Amazon brought things together, the Knot for weddings and stuff like that. They kind of jumped in and they brought all these things together and took out the places that were just sucking costs out of things and not bringing value in it. So whether it's from an external perspective or an internal perspective, that's the way to look at your value chain. And then the third one, the revenue model, I think the way to look at it is just let's pull our revenue stream apart. Can we add some things together and bump up the price because we've done more value, or we've got a lump sum of a number of things and we pull it apart and we price each one. So we can then, the sum of the parts are greater than the whole in that type of thing. So either we add them together or pull them apart and be able to change the amount of revenue that comes from that. To look at this, which came from this article, that IBM had put together over a 10-year period. So it isn't that one is better than the other. You can look across that and you can see Google. Obviously, everybody's aware of Google and all the money and everything that they've made and so forth. And they took all 3 models and put it together and made a difference. But then you can go all the way over to the right side where there was a single model. And that's an Indian telephone company, and what they did is they took the cost out and figured out how to reprice things, and they were on the rocks, actually. They were going out of business. They were forced to look at what was going on, and they went from death's bed to the fact that right at the top of the kind of making all kinds of money because they had to innovate. They had to reevaluate what they're doing. And they focused on just one of the models. So there isn't one right, there isn't one wrong. It's what makes most sense for your organization. But it does provide a perspective on how to look at innovation for the kind of way or how you're really doing business and how can you really bring better value back into the process. So talking about the value, Erica, you've got the next slide that you want to talk about, which is a little bit different than the Calvary Church we did a couple months ago. Gives it a different perspective.
looking at, and we're all familiar with the two sort of, what IBM did however many years ago, moving from, selling servers to selling businesses. But I think this is just an interesting thing, especially to kind of think about where IBM is right now and where HP is right now. And this is the sucked down version of the business model diagram that we did look at a couple months ago. But just from a simple view, of course, is looking at how, HP's value proposition, of course, is consumer electronics, probably add to that business as well, and with thin margins, who are they reaching? The consumer market segment, and the distribution is retail. And then IBM, fundamentally shifting from that, which that's how, they were obviously selling business electronics and servers and that type of stuff, to being a business services organization. And that's a, fundamental business model shift where the value proposition is no longer the product, but the service. Larger margins, obviously, reaching the business market, and the distribution channel and the competencies is no longer around retail in their case, but around the sales team and, of course, the delivery team, if you will. So I just think that's a really sometimes simple way to think about business model shifts, and IBM is obviously the poster child for an effective business model change. But to the more practical, or perhaps more tactical way to think about this was the example of the church moving from, a big mega build that they will come to we are going to, fundamentally change how we reach our congregation by going to them. And that's a shift that they feel like the market is making in their area, and thinking about what the value of their congregants are asking for, and how they reprogram themselves, if you will, or reorganize themselves to deliver on that what the market is asking for. So those are some thoughts on the business model value creation discussion. Let's look at the last strategy, which is another deep dive strategy. And this is something that, I think it's Howard and I were having some fun talking about this as we were preparing, and certainly it can feel a little touchy-feely, but I also think if we're willing to think about it a little bit more robustly, this is kind of where the big potential innovations exist. So let's look at a couple examples of what we're talking about with behavioral innovation. So behavioral innovation is that idea of fundamentally thinking about our organizations as stewards, as trustees, as challenging sort of leadership, challenging the status quo, and then seeing our customers as partners and focusing on people's outcomes. And so I think really when we're talking about behavioral innovation, in that previous slide said, it's all about the people. It's about our organizations having a mindset shift from perhaps just being bottom line driven to being the triple bottom line idea that we're thinking about past the profit, to our impact and the outcomes for our customers, for our partners, for our employees. So there's some examples on here, and we could certainly spend some more time on this, but I want to say that it's pretty easy, and this sounds a lot like the corporate social responsibility, and it being a corporate social responsibility initiative. And you can look at all these organizations, Tom, Starbucks, Walmart, Patagonia. It's on its face value, what we're talking about could just very much be that box of, we're going to have corporate social responsibility goal, and we're going to work with XYZ nonprofit and provide X number of employee hours towards contributing to our community, etc. What we're talking about here around behavioral innovation is much more structural than that. It's much more about the hard choices around prioritizing outcomes and prioritizing our partners and our employees and our customers first, and thinking about how everything shifts to be more steward focused and trustee focused instead of just profit focused. And so I think related to that, when we look at, and here's just kind of an example of what those are, we'll talk about those in just a moment, but Tom's Shoes is, of course, an interesting one, and they've been all over the news, and folks are probably pretty familiar with the fact that their business model and therefore their innovation and is behavioral in nature is, you buy a pair of shoes and that pays for another pair of shoes for someone in a country in which they're shipping them or delivering them to. So again, that sounds a bit like just a corporate social responsibility initiative, but it's not when we think about the fact that the product has to have market value. People have to want their shoes. They have to have a cost a structure that allows this one-to-one. You have to be able to sell the shoes to people at a cost that allows you to produce a second set of shoes with the margin that you're creating from that. You have to make money as well. That would be useful. And then you have to have a group of employees that are willing to get on a plane and go distribute shoes in Argentina. And that may sound all well and good and easy, but that's not something that you can just slap on an organization. The organization was built that way, and it was really built around that innovative idea. Okay, fine. So what do you do when you have an existing organization?
Which is a big challenge.
And I want to toss that over to Howard in just a second, but I want to say, Starbucks is an interesting example of, and they were on another slide, certainly their behavioral innovation on its outset, again, looks very simple, working with free trade farmers, and making choices to only use coffee beans that are from free trade farms, and not essentially exploiting the farmers. And of course, has to have market value, has to be willing to pay $5 for a cup of coffee. Okay, fine, we're all used to that. Well, Starbucks is kind of in an interesting place right now. They're not growing like they used to. Brought Howard Schultz back in, great article on HPR last month related to choices that they made. They could have made a choice to franchise. They could have said, well, Wall Street's asking for us to continue to deliver the returns we've been delivering historically. One way to do that is to franchise, and due to the sort of place that they found themselves in, and Howard Schultz came back in and said, we're not doing that. And one of the reasons we're not doing that is because core and central to our organization is our people and our ability to drive the values that we believe in through the organization. And if we franchise, we fracture the culture, because we are a people organization. We are a service organization. That's a fundamental choice. It was a hard choice that was made, which is not a corporate social responsibility initiative. It's an innovative behavioral initiative to say we understand what drives our innovation. We understand that people drive our innovation. Our people are our innovation, and we're going to make that choice. And the last point I'll make is Patagonia. Patagonia is an interesting organization. Many of us are familiar with them. They're a clothing manufacturer, and their behavioral innovation is around whatever is larger, 10% of revenue or 1% of profit will be donated to environmental causes. And they make those choices even when they're in the red. Now, they're a private company, and they're owned by a family, of course, and so that organization, they can make those choices to take out a savings or whatever, but they make those hard choices, which is, again, much stronger than just, writing a check to an environmental cause. So, Howard, do you want to talk about the source of advantage and add to the color around behavioral innovation?
I want to throw in a point there, just real personal, because our organization has dug into that, trying to look at that behavioral standpoint, talk to our people, how we can actually bring in some of those thoughts that Eric had mentioned. It is not easy. There's no doubt that the folks in our organization have appetite for it. They would love to do it, and when you try to put the dollars and cents to it and the value to it, unless you happen to be like Tom Shoes, and so forth, you've got to go back to the beginning when you first developed. So it is not a real easy done, even though it has some really benefits for all folks in the organization. There's definitely a mindset that has to come together in this to make this transition. It's definitely difficult in the environment we're finding ourselves into, but it's the innovation process that we have to look through to embrace these is such that I think probably fits around this, if you want to call it innovation team or whatever else, and it has to be really cross-functional. have to bring people in from all aspects of business to try to bring this behavioral thing in, because we don't want any unintended consequences along with it. And the impact really needs to be far-reaching, as you can see along with the two lists there. The cost advantage yesterday was all about me. I was taking money, I was receiving it, and that was my bottom line. Today is not necessarily just a loss, but it's a cost advantage that we could share throughout. So we just don't maintain it our bottom line; we share it around. So it's an interesting challenge, and we hoped at one point in time that we're going to be able to really get this, but it's something that really stirs our folks, our team, and we're working at it.
Application of this, of course, is something to think about in our organizations about whether this is an innovation strategy that has legs for you. So let's wrap this up with a couple of slides that'll hopefully bring it home. There's a set of metrics here, and I know this is probably a little bit hard to see, but again, sharing the slides, you'll be able to see these a bit more upfront and personal. These metrics are just an idea of how you might measure whether or not your innovation strategies are effective. So here's a host of them, and then this is also back to that McKinsey study about the ones that are used in organizations. Some are input metrics and some are output metrics. Looking at the next slide, we just wanted to show the last thing on this related to, so what do I do? How do I evaluate if I want to do one of these different innovation strategies? So we kind of wanted to share, so here's our summary of our innovation strategy, then what are some next steps? And as we're maybe talking through this, we'll share some tools that you might consider using to help deploy these innovation strategies in your organization. So, of course, just kind of recapping, we talked about cost innovation. Probably everybody on the phone would say, we're all doing this right now, we better be. Our ability to do it effectively is really kind of what really matters to drive the results that we're looking for. One way to do it is what Howard spoke about before, is sort of that bubbling up from the bottom, creating a tiger team that's cross-functional, can actually help assess business processes and potential new technologies that can drive costs out of the organization. One tool that you might use or a discipline that you might use that obviously a lot of folks are using right now is Lean Six Sigma. So great structural process to help you assess processes or improvements in processes that can be made. And I know sometimes we throw these tools out and we think, oh great, here's another thing we need to be thinking about. But it's kind of, when we look at how do we drive cost out of the business, Lean Six Sigma is certainly one of those best practices that definitely helps us do that.
And another reason Six Sigma is important too, because it definitely is cross-functional, looks at things. And when you start talking about driving costs out, and we're talking about service organization, costs are head count, people, and when you want to start chopping costs, you've got turf wars. So you need a cross-functional team that really has an honest perspective on what they're doing.
Other innovation strategy we talked about, of course, is product service innovation. We are all really familiar with that. And so your next steps on that, of course, would be assessing the risk appetite. How far are we really willing to step out there, and really what resources do we have to effectively bring said new product and service ideas to market. And I really think, organizations, at least in our experience, and you probably will agree with this as well, in your organization, ideas are cheap, execution is quite a bit harder, and realizing the revenue from those good ideas is yet even one step further from that. So what's your tool to help do that? Those slides that we went through with that one chart that talks about where we get our ideas, raw ideas to market-ready ideas, that's one piece. And then, of course, the product service innovation process, and using something like a segment scorecard or some sort of portfolio management tool for you. Those are simple, but those slides are right the specific tools that you can use to be more rigorous around moving from ideas to new products and services, if that's one of the innovation strategies that you're executing against. Business model innovation, of course, we spoke about that as well. What are our next steps there? Do we need to think about a new business model or reevaluating our value chain, certainly there's a lot of chatter and discussion right now that everybody should be doing this. And, I really think about, especially government entities right now, there's a lot of challenge to think about what the new business model is. What should we really be doing as government, as government service organizations? What should other organizations and communities do to provide community services to organizations? I think that whole piece is just massive right now as we're rethinking about who we are and what we do as organizations. And the great tool on that, of course, was what we talked about 2 times ago, and that was that business model template. And really, really great book out there that's new called Business Model Generation. Just a really cool way to dig deep into how do we really think about new business models. So those are your tools for that strategy.
And also, the old basic value chain from Michael Porter has been around a long time. Go back and there's probably a couple HBR articles out there as well, help you really get the perspective on this foundational, how you pull it all apart and really look at it with a critical eye.
Right. Yep. And the template that we were referring to with the business model, as a business model template, is on Wikipedia. So if you just Wikipedia business model, you'll find that. If you Wikipedia value chain, you'll find it there as well. And then, of course, behavioral innovation is the last one that we just spent a little bit of time on. And frankly, we don't necessarily have any tools out there other than to think about how other organizations are doing it, and does that really work for you? And certainly we have on there assessing the current business model for potential gaps, and is behavioral innovation something that really makes sense for your organization? And we added this as well. Determine if it just really creates value or it just sounds good. At the end of the day, we're responsible for creating value for our companies, our shareholders, our citizens, our customers. And it's not just a feel-good discussion. It really actually, that's the whole point about that strategy, is it has to be fundamental to the organization. So Howard's going to wrap us up with some takeaways and an overarching thought on innovation.
The first point goes back to last month's article. There's big rewards for the innovation. There's big rewards for being disruptive inside your industry and becoming a hero. There's better return on it. They're in that one particular article that came out of Bain. They've got 5 steps. We're not talking about just jumping in and willy-nilly doing things, being very, very laser focused on what you're doing, but there's huge ROI for it. The next point is consider the type of innovation that's going to make the biggest impact. So you've got the information that we've summarized here is a jumping off point. As Erica had mentioned, the new sort of behavioral changes is a wonderful thing. It sounds good. Everybody like to embrace it. There's no doubt that the new workforce that's out there, the 20-somethings and millenniums, that's really something that resonates well with them. So definitely pay attention to that and see if it really can't work. Measuring the outcome is absolutely critical. What we found that in a number of the articles that I've read, that more and more companies are embracing innovation. It's going to they're looking for it to make a difference in their organizational success, bring new performance, but the challenge is around measuring it. So what we always recommend when you jump off into this, figure out how you're going to measure it before you launch into it, instead of trying to measure something that's already a moving part. And Erica had mentioned, there was a couple slides back, that there was kind of a laundry list of potential metrics that you can at least start and or tweak, but we need to make sure that what we're doing is going to really generate the bottom line we need. So plan the measurement before we launch off into the process. So those are the takeaways, the high level. With that said, are there any insights, Brian, or questions that we had that came up?
So wasn't much feedback. I outside of two similar kind of questions, so try to combine them together here. But referring back to slide 28, I'll just pull that back up. Two people, one said they're a small business, another one said they're an SMB, so we'll just call that a mid-size. So existing SMB, how to achieve behavioral innovation, specifically kind of any ideas to help identify those gaps. And that's why I pulled up slide 28, because it said assess current business model for potential gaps, and how to research or analyze this. One person wanted to know, was there anything bite-sized to be able to achieve that? Another person was looking for a resource, any direction we got to point them in.
Related to behavioral innovation.
Yeah.
So a couple things. I don't have the template on this necessarily because it's not that straightforward. So here's a couple ideas. Number one is on the previous slide, I think, on behavioral innovation. If we go back to the one that had the two advantages, the sources of advantages, and I'm not going to be able to say his name, so Umar Haq, let's try that. He is sort of really heading up this conversation, or at least he's kind of brought it to a conceptual head, if you will. And he has some great articles on HBR. And HBR.org, of course, there's tons of non-HBR review articles there, but some blog posts and that type of thing. So he is a regular contributor there. He has a lot of articles about behavioral innovation. So I think if you want to dig deeper into that, that's one place to go from a research perspective. And again, he didn't make this up. He was just shedding some light on something that organizations are doing. What I think is important about that, though, is he's certainly approaching it from a little bit of a academic perspective. It's like really easy to talk about this. It's a lot harder to do, and that's of course what someone was asking about. So another thing that I would recommend is on the slide that had all the logos on it. When Ryan sends it, there's embedded links, and those all go to the specific websites that talk about what these organizations are doing related to embedding behavioral innovation in their organizations. Now, it is sort of couched in that corporate social responsibility perspective, but this will give you, I think, really kind of looking at what some other organizations are doing kind of helps you assess whether or not that works for you. So that's something that I find really useful. And then the third thing that I would recommend, and this is where things overlap a little bit, I actually do think that taking out that business model template and filling it out and seeing where you can shift your thinking around making your customers and your partners and your employee partners, right? So your customers, employees as partners, and thinking about how you can actually sort of in the middle of that business model diagram is the value, right? This is the value proposition. What's the larger value proposition that you might be able to deploy when you think about your customers as partners, when you think about your employees as partners, when you think about the outcomes that you're really trying to go for past just the profit outcome for the organization. So I really do think that business model template is a really great way to get your arms around. Is this just a corporate social responsibility initiative, or is this something that we can really deploy through a people culture, a customer value creation, a company value creation? And so those are the three things I would recommend. Check out Umar Haq on HBR.org, the business model template, and then beg and borrow and steal from what some of these guys are doing, and Howard has some ideas as well.
Going back to what Ryan's question, we were talking about smaller organizations.
Yeah.
And looking at those four, and I think that probably the partnership in bringing your customers, your employees together, and looking at together and coming out with a singularly outcome that would be beneficial to wherever the product or service is, and giving a different perspective to it. I think that's something that a smaller organization could get their arms around without having to provide a huge, resource into making this whole thing come together. Investment, that's what I was trying to think. And that would probably be one place that I think that I would start if I was a smaller organization.
Right. It's asking your customers.
Yeah, your people and your customers, how can we come together to make this different, from a behavioral thing, get everybody together to really make a difference in our economy or our community or whatever that might be.
That's great. I think that's a great idea. Yep. I'll just add one last thought about this, because we've been exploring this too. We're a small organization. There's about 13 of us, and how do we effectively, as Howard mentioned, drive behavioral innovation that has that triple bottom line impact, and also make sure that we all have, we don't just sort of launch off into that. We have, paychecks at the end of the day as well, right? So we're really thinking about how do we leverage our competitive advantages and extend it past our customers to something greater than that. And then of course, and those advantages, part of those are the behavioral people components of that, but it's that larger discussion that we were having as well about how do we take what we do really, really well and what people pay us for, and how do we extend that into a larger outcome for other potential customers or people that we're contributing to, and then of course also how does that add value to our employees' work life, and not just be like a whole nother set of stuff we have to do. So hopefully that's a little additive as well. Wrapping us up, we're at the top of the hour. Really fun stuff to talk about. I hope you enjoyed it. I know we did. We love to talk about this stuff and think about it and how we really make it real. That's always what we're trying to bring to the conversation. So let's have another real conversation next month, September 29th, same time, same day, same place. We'd love to know what's on your mind. Please send an email with what you'd like to talk about or anything you'd like covered to admin@mystrategicplan.com, or give us a call. If you would like to share your ideas or what's working for you, we'd love to host you. So let us know. And then of course, as everybody says right now, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at MyStrategicPlan.com to see what we're talking about over the next month. And also we always share what other people are talking about too. So it's just a really great source of ideas about strategy. And then lastly, you will be getting an email with a link, recorded link, and supporting slides from today. So with that, I'll say thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Ryan, as always, for bringing this great